Okay.
Okay, so now we are recording. And if you want, you can make our thing, so that will just stay up there, and then if you want, you just make our thing bigger, yeah.
Okay.
Well,
All right. And then just click to bring it to the next slide.
yep, you should be good to just use
Use
the,
that.
as long as the mouse is over on that screen, you should
Okay.
be good to just,
Is it shared?
I think so, yes.
So I
it
can
is.
just
Yeah,
that
I had it all
there.
there before we started, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Out of the way.
It'll all still go on, even if you're not here.
Okay. Are we ready to go?
Yes,
Okay. So I don't know if anyone's on Zoom. Hopefully we'll have some people on Zoom. I don't see anybody yet.
They'd be on the other screen.
They'd be on the other screen. Okay. I don't see them. All right. So welcome to our session called AI and Student Professional Writing. I'm Lynn Blanchfield. Ryan.
Oh, I'm Ryan Stiles.
I'm Stephanie Pritchard.
And just some background on what we've been doing. Stephanie, Ryan, and I have been working this past semester about professional writing in various ways. And I decided it might not be a bad idea to have an AI session about professional writing and the do's and don'ts of professional writing. So we only have 20 minutes. So we're going to make it short and sweet and leave some time for questions. I'll present, then I think Stephanie's going to go and then Ryan's going to go. So we have some things to say about that. Okay, next one. Oops, nope. There we go. So this past year, I've been working with Stephanie and working in the Writing Center about using fellowship and grad school applications. So I've been working with a lot of students, mostly seniors, with their fellowship applications, but also graduate school applications. And I've learned a lot from those experiences with students. And I thought talking a little bit about using AI or not using AI when students are creating their fellowship applications or the grad school applications, particularly the essays, might be a good idea. And one of the main things that I try to share with students as I'm talking with them about graduate school applications and fellowship applications, because I do work with students about Fulbright applications, is the main goal is to share your own experiences and your own voice. This is something I emphasize over and over and over again, because you're presenting yourself for a fellowship or a graduate school, and it's really important that they share who they are and why they want this fellowship or graduate school experience, and what they can offer the grad school, what they can offer the fellowship, but also what that fellowship or grad school can offer them. And as a representative for SUNY Oswego and the National Association of Fellowship Advisors, I went through their code of ethics, which is very clear about use of AI, or at least about original work. There's been a big debate about using AI with fellowship applications in particular. The jury's still out about that, but one of the things about the code of ethics for NAFA, it's called NAFA, is that the work as a student should be the sole and original work of the applicant. And in some cases, like the Rhodes Scholarship, for example, they don't want any editing or any kind of assistance from anybody or anything outside of the applicant's own work. So they're really very, very specific about that. And they also have students sign a waiver saying that the work that they're producing is actually their own. So it's very clear what they want. And this is something that I adhere to when I advise students for fellowships and also for graduate schools. And one of the things that I thought about in terms of using AI for fellowship and grad school applications is that Stephanie's going to talk more about is the use of AI for brainstorming ideas. So students can use it to get ideas about, what kinds of issues in their background they want to share with a graduate school. What might a personal essay for a graduate school look like? That might be a good way to use AI. They may also want to think about how statements of graduate school might work best within their applications and their essays. But ultimately, those applications should reflect their unique voice and the honest voice of the applicant. So AI can be used, but I think it has some challenges, which we can talk about later. So.
Okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about sort of like the pros and cons, right, of using AI for professional writing endeavors. So we're really thinking about, like Lynn was talking about, for these different sorts of graduate and fellowship applications, the uniqueness is something that's really valued from every school or every opportunity that students are applying to. And the challenging thing about AI is that while it can generate very, very polished and very, very good text, I think, right? I mean, I've had AI generate some really good things. The unique qualities that sometimes, these places are looking for can sometimes be lost within the very polished nature of like ChatGPT generated text. So one of the challenges, I think, for anybody who teaches writing or has a writing component, right, in your courses is helping our students understand that, like, yes, polished writing is good, but like your ideas are what really matter, right? And I mean, I spend an enormous amount of time in English 102, which is our introductory writing course, trying to help my students understand that, like, yes, I know that you went through grade school and like everybody cared about, like whether or not your commas were in the right places. But like now that you're here, I really want to know what you think about this issue, how you feel about this problem. I want to see what angle you're going to take, right? Because that's innovation, right? That's what a huge part of being in college is. And I think, for our incoming students, they really struggle with that. But even over the course of their 4 years here, while some make really wonderful progress and like start to do those sorts of things, some I think still have like it's an application, right? So they're kind of still thinking about it in this almost kind of formulaic way, which can be helpful, right? Like understanding structure and how a piece of writing moves is important, but understanding like the value of one's own story or the value of your own experience is perhaps more so helpful. And it's hard, I think, to get students to really understand that. So one of the things that I talk to them about is, like really valuing the power in your own voice. And how graduate schools especially, right, but fellowship applications too, are going to be looking for that voice, and not for you to just sound like another polished piece of writing. So as we think about that, though, you can use AI to kind of like help get to those places, right? To help you think about what story you might want to share or what experience maybe would perhaps be valuable for you to talk about in your application or in your essay. So anybody who's heard me talk about AI knows that I really like AI for brainstorming. It's my favorite way to use it. So one of the things that you can do is you can, tell your AI tool like, hey, this is what I'm doing, right? I'm applying for graduate school. Here's the university I'm applying to. And I have to write an essay to go along with my application, but I'm really not sure what I want to say. Can you help me? But like, instead of just phrasing it like that, because AI is so incredibly helpful that it just wants to generate an essay for you the second you ask it for help, right? You could say something like, can you help me by asking me one question at a time and let me respond to your questions so that I can brainstorm possible stories or experiences or things that I would like to include in this essay? And that's a much more helpful way to use AI, right? Because then it will ask you a question, you can reply to it. It will respond back to you by saying things like, that's very valuable, right? Like, even if it might not be. And then you can continue in that exchange, right? And kind of like use it to help flesh out what some of your ideas are. So it's important for you, the user, to really guide the tool, because if you don't, it will just generate and generate and generate. And like that doesn't necessarily mean quantity isn't always quality, right? So that can be a problem. And helping our students understand that, I think, is super important. I think that one of the things that is challenging right now is that there are a lot of AI tools, including Grammarly, right, that will revise your writing as you are working on it as well. And I mean, I think it's helpful, but at the same time, I mean, I was messing around with AI the other day and I asked it to revise something that I wrote. And I mean, like it did not sound like me anymore. Like after it was done, it sounded very polished, right? But it did not sound like me. So I think one of the issues with having AI as a revising tool is that it almost can't help itself, right? And even if you tell it to go through and just fix the grammar, it will. But it might also make some other tweaks too. So, you know, like obviously I work in the writing center. I think it's really important for people to have help on their writing assignments. So for revision, especially after my recent experimentation with revising in ChatGPT the other day, I still think it's most valuable to encourage students to come in and talk to someone like a peer or to talk to you, their instructor, right? To get feedback on how they might revise. At this point, I personally feel that AI is too willing to just make the changes. And then it ends up changing a whole bunch of what was originally there, you know, and that's problematic. One other kind of like note is that, you know, in addition to using it for brainstorming, one thing that I think is super helpful is, you know, students can also use AI to like help generate like an outline, you know? So if you do have a student who struggles with things like organization, having an AI tool build an outline for you that you can follow with steps can also be a really nice alternative in addition to kind of figuring out what you might want to write about. So all of those things are helpful options. But I think like at this point, the revision part makes me really nervous. And then also, you know, like if you are a student putting your stuff in, you want to think about like, okay, I'm going to put this draft into, let's say, ChatGPT. Remember that everything you put in stays in, right? So that's also like an important thing to kind of remember, right? You want to make sure that you're not sharing information with OpenAI that you wouldn't want to share with like the general public. So there's good things and bad things.
Thank you.
And so kind of to carry this conversation into the resume and AI assisted resume building world, for resumes that kind of works on the offhand, we've heard a lot about how AI can be used as a beneficial brainstorming tool. However, when it comes to drafting your resume, the opposite is true. Students need to be encouraged to do more of their own work to front load it. So, you know, there's thankfully when it comes to resume, there's very standard resume formats. You know, the university here has great resources in career services that will help students draft and compile their resumes and the information that they needed for them. So, you know, so with that being said, like AI is most effective for resumes as a review tool and not as an actual writer, mainly because any job or experience or project that students want to list on their resume, you're looking for the details to be very specific as, you know, they're leading with their action or dynamic verbs. They're providing the statement about what they did or what that project or experience entailed, and then they're looking to provide results. And I also like to remind students that those things are very specific to them. So they need to provide those details that then ideally they're going to be following up in the interviews that they get from those resumes with. And unfortunately, AI is not a tool that can give them specifics that then they're going to effectively speak to during an interview. And so to have to pair those concepts together for your students is what will help them realize that they have to put more information in on the front side and then just go to AI and say, hey, will you review this experience or these project details and see, have I aligned, does my experience align to a specific job description that I'm applying for? It also can help students really understand if the job that they're looking to apply for or the scholarship or the opportunity, if there's skills that they might be missing in their resume. So sometimes it works out really well to say, hey, like, you have these strong points, but the description is asking for this. Do you have any experience in this that you might want to add into your resume to fully flesh it out, to be a good match for that? A lot of times what's happening for companies and businesses, they're relying on applicant tracking systems. So what they're doing is they're using AI to review resumes and applications. And sometimes students fail to understand that when they use AI to create a vague resume, they're not effectively speaking to those applicant tracking systems. And so their resume automatically gets kicked out without them being aware of it, which is also another helpful review tool that AI can provide to say, hey, like, of the NACE competencies that all employers and colleges look for. Does my resume speak to all of them or most of them, so that when it goes to an applicant tracking system, it's picking out those keywords and saying, yes, this student has critical thinking, they have teamwork, they've demonstrated leadership, and then that way they're being flagged in a good way from those systems. So again, AI for resume writing is best on the offside. It's good for refining, tailoring, and polishing, but I strongly advise students against using it to even start their resumes. Usually I want them to have a resume set, and then we can go through and we can say, okay, now let's compare. What are you trying to use this resume for? Are you tailoring it to this specific job? Are you missing information that might be key to your success? So that's where it's most beneficial there. And I think the other thing too, Stephanie, you started to mention, be careful about what you put into AI, because you don't want to be putting, highly sensitive information that you don't necessarily want to divulge to the general public about work that you've done. Say you've worked on a highly, secretive project or something that you want to keep limited exposure to, or something that's not published to the general world yet. And if you're putting that on your resume to only speak to a small audience, if you're putting that into AI, all of a sudden AI knows it and it's out there. So I think you have to be really careful about what you divulge in that regard as well.
In all of these things, I think what we've all emphasized is AI can be used appropriately in certain circumstances, but there are also problems with it, obviously. And one thing I've learned in dealing with students, dealing with graduate school essays, is that they don't often know what the graduate schools are looking for. So we actually have to have a conversation about what they're looking for and why they want to apply. And the other thing to mention here, unlike the resumes, which may have a bot reading these initially, eventually somewhere down the line, a real person's going to be reading these things, and a real person wants to know that they're getting the authentic voice of a real person who is shaping their story. And when I started doing fellowship advising years and years ago, I used to do it with Allison in political science, and she had a really great phrase that she said, everybody has a story. Some people tell their stories better. And that has always stuck with me. And I think AI can be used to sort of have the outline, as Stephanie mentioned, or having keywords or other things, as Ryan mentioned, but it can also be used for brainstorming, maybe an outline, maybe getting, I liked when Allison was talking this morning about pie. And I thought, for me, it was too conversational, but I can see students liking pie as a way of conversing with someone and getting feedback immediately, as opposed to waiting a week and then talking with me or talking with you or talking with the student about their writing. They get immediate feedback, and maybe they can actually begin to shape their story in a way that's that they can include certain things, like, what do I include? What do I not include? Does this story fit with that story? Does this experience fit with that experience? Then again, one thing they're looking for is also, do you have like a running theme or some kind of thesis in your stories that where every story relates to one another, and then also relates to the graduate school program you're applying to? And maybe AI can help you figure out, am I doing that? Am I actually fulfilling that kind of that purpose that they're wanting? So do we have any questions? Any questions from anybody? Think
I'll just tack on like a final kind of thought also. This is something I've been thinking about a lot recently. And I have a couple of writing tutors later in the next session after this, actually, who are going to talk about AI and how they use AI and some other things. But one of the fascinating things I think for everybody to kind of keep in mind with this kind of writing and all the writing is that, we don't want to lose the humanity in the things that we're writing, especially as good writing is being sort of like questioned more and more and more. Like, did a human actually write this or not? Right. So I think for things too, like graduate school, and really any opportunity like post college, whether it's a job or what have you, making sure that like you sound like a human in your writing, I think is going to be more important than ever.
mm-hmm.
Let me ask you, put any difference in sharing information in a paid version where you turn off the learning versus, the free version, which you can't turn it off?
And I think that that's a great point. I think that that also though raises like the equity stuff, right? Especially if we're thinking about like our students
Right.
who can afford the paid version versus not, unless the institution has access to that, like for them. So because I think that that's a great point, Sean. But the equity piece for the students, I think, is challenging.
Cause I like to put things I have written in the paid version and turn off the learning.
Right.
Just cause I know like in my voice, there'll just be so many extra words inside of it. So I find it can help me to go and get more to the point.
Sure.
But then it really needs to be re-edited again, cause it isn't necessarily in my voice.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was really surprised the other day when I was using it to revise a CFP because I was sending in something for a conference, and like the original thing that I had written, I mostly just wanted it to like clean up a little bit. I knew I had a couple clunky sentences, and I mean like holy crap, like the whole thing. Even though I only told it like look at this sentence, it can't help itself.
Well, and I think to that point exactly, it goes into do students understand how to engage with AI and how are they prompting it? So, not only is it what are you putting in, but how are you dictating to AI to engage with it? I found it a lot for the resume work that I've done, and even this kind of crosses over into cover letters. Am I making sure to tell AI I only want comparison between A and B? I only want it to look at my use of first person and eliminate, redundancy or inappropriate verb tense. So I think it's very important to also remind yourselves like what you're asking AI to do and prompting it correctly in that sense.
For sure.
It is just a tool after all, and
Right.
we can control that, yeah.
And then making sure that it follows through
Mhm.
with
Right.
that, right? I mean, how many times have I told it to generate something that's 250 words and it gives me 500,
Right. That's only issue.
Can't count.
Okay, so
Could you go back a slide?
Okay, I think I can go back a slide. Nope. Which slide?
Well, there was a slide where someone said, don't even try to put your material into AI because you're not supposed to get outside feedback.
Oh, that one.
Yeah,
You're supposed to keep things
the
yourself.
caution. Yeah, the
So-
cautionary tale. Yeah.
I mean, is there like a danger beyond that? Just like they'll know that you put it in, like even if you even touch the pool, they're gonna know you were in the pool.
Oh, you
Are
mean
they-
for fellowship advising,
Yeah.
things like that? No, they won't know, but you're basically signing a waiver whenever you apply for a fellowship and for graduate school too. You're signing the document saying that you didn't use any outside help. You didn't have the ability to use an outside editor, or someone didn't alter your words, that this is actually your work. What you're producing is actually yours.
And that goes for non-AI editors as
Yep,
well.
absolutely. So for Rhodes Scholarship, for example, they have to sign a document saying that everything they produce is actually theirs and that no one else has actually read or commented or given any editorial assistance. When I do fellowship advising here in Oswego, I make students sign a waiver saying that they are representing SUNY Oswego and that all work that they're producing is actually theirs and that has not been altered, that they've not gotten AI assistance or something like that, that basically they're attesting to academic integrity, right? Which is the hallmark of our school. That they are saying that they're representing the school and that that what they produced is actually their own work. So, yeah, it doesn't say anything about AI, but it is, it has to be their honest voice. And I think we're done, right?